License and registration. The words came out flat, almost mechanical, spoken by a man who had already decided what kind of story this was going to be. But what if he was wrong? On a quiet road just outside Denton, Missouri, the golden hour light spilled over the hood of a luxury sedan still warm from the sun. Inside sat Franklin Moore, a black man in his early 50s dressed in a charcoal gray suit, hands resting calmly on the wheel. He'd done nothing wrong, and yet here he was, pulled over, under scrutiny, questioned like a suspect. The officer didn't ask kindly, didn't smile, didn't listen. He only looked at Franklin and saw a threat. But what he didn't see was the badge in Franklin's pocket. And what he couldn't imagine was how that single stop would unravel the very system he thought he understood. Thank you for being here. Sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those, quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now, let's take a closer look at what really happened. The breeze in Denton that evening carried the scent of cut grass and something else. Stillness. A kind of hush that comes before a storm, when everything seems ordinary until it isn't. Franklin Moore adjusted the dial on his radio as soft jazz played through the speakers of his silver Cadillac. The ATOC hummed, barely audible over the quiet piano keys. He'd just left a council meeting at City Hall. It had run long, but he didn't mind. He liked the feeling of finishing something meaningful. He was halfway home when the red and blue lights flickered in his rearview mirror. His brow furrowed. No sudden lane changes, no speeding, not even a rolling stop. And yet, here it came, one cruiser, tires crunching softly behind him. Franklin pulled over without hesitation, hands at 10 and 2 calm, measured. He'd done this before. From the patrol car stepped Officer Kyle Benton, mid-30s, mirror, lens sunglasses still on despite the fading sun, and a heavy walk that said he wasn't just out to write tickets. He was out to remind someone who was in charge. License and registration, Benton said, not with courtesy, but with authority soaked in suspicion. Franklin complied, his motions deliberate, no sudden gestures, no room for interpretation. The officer barely glanced at the documents. You from around here? Franklin gave a short nod. Just moved here a few months back. The address is on the license. But Benton wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for attitude, for weakness, for something he could justify. Where are you headed this late? Home. From City Hall. Benton raised a brow. You work for the city? Sort of, Franklin replied. Internal affairs. That was the first sign. A flicker, barely noticeable behind those sunglasses, but a flicker all the same. Doubt, maybe, or realization. But it vanished as quickly as it came. Step out of the vehicle? Benton ordered. Franklin hesitated only a second, not out of fear, but out of calculation. Every second mattered now. Every movement could be misread. Is there a reason, officer? You don't want to make this harder than it has to be, Benton said. The line was familiar, coded, loaded. Franklin stepped out. The pavement still held the day's warmth. A few joggers passed on the other side of the street but didn't stop. Didn't look. Benton gestured to the hood. Hands where I can see them. Franklin complied. The officer's hands were rough, methodical, unnecessarily forceful as he patted him down. Business suit and out, of state tags, Benton muttered. What do you do again? Franklin looked him in the eye. I hold people accountable. That was when Benton stepped back slightly. Franklin's voice remained even. You seem agitated, officer. Is this how you usually handle traffic stops? Benton crossed his arms. You think you're above this because you got a nice car and a fancy job? No, Franklin replied. But I do know the law. And I know this isn't it. Silence stretched between them. Franklin didn't yell, didn't resist. He just stood there. Like a mirror, refusing to reflect anything but the truth. That made Officer Benton uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. He leaned in, voice low. You think you know how this ends? Huh. Franklin nodded slowly. I do. And so will you? With that he reached, slowly, deliberately, into his inside jacket pocket. Benton's hand went immediately to his holster. What are you doing? Franklin stopped. Just showing you the badge you didn't ask about. He pulled out the worn leather wallet and flipped it open. Inside, a gleaming gold badge. Franklin Moore, Director of Internal Affairs, Denton County Law Enforcement Oversight Division. It was like watching a curtain drop on a stage. Benton's confidence crumbled. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His posture softened, not from humility, but from panic. I thought, Benton began. That, Franklin said, is exactly the problem. The air between them thickened. No traffic noise, no wind. Just silence, pure and revealing. "I've seen your file," Franklin continued. "And if I hadn't, I would have remembered this face when it showed up in a report." Benton swallowed hard. Franklin took a step closer. "Not to threaten, but to anchor the moment in truth. You pulled me over for a red light I didn't run. You escalated without reason. You searched with no cause. All because I didn't look like I belonged." He paused. "You were looking for something, and now you found it." For a moment, Officer Benton didn't move. His hand dropped from the holster slowly, as if realizing too late that the weapon had never been the real power in this exchange. "I didn't know who you were," he stammered. Franklin Moore didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "That's the problem, officer," he said, his tone like glass, clear and sharp. "You didn't care who I was. You thought you knew. You saw the suit, the skin, the car, and that was enough." The sun dipped lower behind the trees lining Westfield Avenue. Street lamps began flickering on, casting long shadows over the scene. Franklin's shadow was steady. Officer Benton's was beginning to tremble. "I've reviewed a dozen complaints about you," Franklin continued, "all buried in paperwork, all dismissed as attitude problems, noncompliance, or lack of evidence." He held up a folded sheet, printed earlier that day. "This one's from 2 months ago. A teenage boy, 17. You pulled him out of his mom's car in the middle of the rain because his hoodie was up." Benton's face flushed. "That was a misunderstanding." Franklin tilted his head. "And this?" He pulled another slip from his folder. "Elderly man. Didn't answer your questions fast enough, so you called him a risk." "I didn't mean." "No." Franklin cut in. "You didn't think. You didn't reflect. You just acted. Because you thought no one would ever look deeper." A jogger slowed down across the street, eyes drawn by the stillness. From a nearby home, a porch light flicked on. Suburbia was waking up to something they rarely saw the moment power gets questioned by quiet authority. Franklin stepped closer. "I know your supervisors. I know the internal channels you've sidestepped. I know which body cam files never made it to review. And I know how to fix all of it." He reached into his pocket again, this time producing a small digital recorder. "It's all on here. The questions. The search. The unnecessary use of force." Benton's jaw clenched. "You're trying to ruin me." "No," Franklin replied. "I'm trying to reveal you." And then, something unexpected happened. Officer Benton slumped slightly, his shoulders no longer squared in defiance. There was something in his eyes, still guarded but beginning to soften. The certainty had drained from his posture, and in its place was something close to fear. Or maybe recognition. I didn't join the force to be this," Benton muttered. "It just gets to you sometimes, the pressure, the expectations." Franklin nodded slightly. "Pressure doesn't excuse prejudice. The badge doesn't make you invincible. It makes you visible. And every decision you make, every moment like this, is a mirror." He looked the officer dead in the eye. "So tell me, Officer Benton, when you look into that mirror, what do you see?" The question hung there heavy. "Honest." Benton didn't answer. He didn't have to. Franklin turned toward his car and opened the door. Then he paused, one hand still on the roof. "I'll be filing my report tomorrow," he said. "It's not just your job that's on the line. It's the culture you represent." Benton stood frozen, the weight of it all finally settling onto his badge. He looked down, not in shame, but maybe, for the first time, in self-awareness. Franklin got in and drove off slowly, his silhouette fading into the soft purple of twilight. Behind him, Officer Benton didn't move for a long time, and for the first time in his career he didn't feel in control. He felt accountable. It didn't take long. By noon the next day, a digital file landed on Chief Eleanor Pratt's desk at the Denton Police Department. Subject line: Incident Review Officer Kyle Benton. Attached was everything: body cam footage, audio recordings, timestamped notes, and the official complaint signed by Franklin Moore, Director of Internal Affairs. It wasn't just a complaint. It was a mirror held up to the entire department. Chief Pratt, a career officer nearing retirement, sharp as a tack and respected across state lines, sat back in her chair and read every word. No distractions, no denials. By the end, her hand was resting on the receiver of her office phone. "Get Benton in here." Now, across town, Officer Benton sat in a small room, his badge resting on the desk in front of him. His hands were folded tightly, his eyes fixed downward. No sunglasses now, no swagger. Franklin Moore sat across from him, joined by a legal advisor and a union representative. A procedural requirement, but Franklin didn't need backup. He had the truth. "This isn't about you alone," Franklin began, but you've become a symbol of a deeper issue. Benton didn't interrupt for once. He listened. Franklin continued, calm and clear. Every complaint, every false stop, every moment you leaned on your badge instead of your judgment, it added up. And now we're here. The department's legal rep spoke up. What are you recommending, Mr. Moore? Franklin glanced down at his report. Immediate suspension, mandatory de-escalation training, psychological re-evaluation, and most importantly, public acknowledgement. You want him to apologize. The union rep asked, half laughing. I want him to understand. Franklin replied, the apology isn't the solution, it's the starting point. Benton spoke at last. Why are you doing this like this? Franklin looked up. Because I've spent my career reading about injustice, watching videos, filing reports. But nothing changes until the person wearing the badge sees himself clearly. Benton's shoulders sank slightly, not broken, just beginning to bend. It wasn't revenge. It was reform. Meanwhile, behind closed doors at Denton City Hall, the mayor, police union, and civil oversight committee were already buzzing. Franklin's report didn't stop at Benton. It included 6 other officers with patterns of questionable stops, disproportionate enforcement, and vague use of force records. 7 names, 1 department, dozens of silenced voices. Mayor Jean Russell called an emergency press briefing. She didn't sugarcoat it. This isn't a story about one officer. It's about a system that rewarded silence over accountability. And thanks to Director Moore, that silence ends now. Across living rooms and lunkrooms in Denton, televisions flickered with his name. Some cheered. Others grumbled. But no one could say they didn't know anymore. Franklin's war room. Franklin sat in his small office. Neat, efficient, no photos on the walls. Just reports, data, and a whiteboard filled with timelines and overlapping cases. This wasn't his first internal review, but it might be his most important. He launched a department-wide audit, stop records, complaint files, body cam reviews. He met with faith leaders, neighborhood watch groups, veteran officers, and teenage first-time drivers. He didn't yell. He listened. Respect starts with understanding, he told one rookie class. Not just of the law, but of the people you serve. He hosted an open town hall, 300 people packed into the high school auditorium. He stood alone on stage, no uniform, no podium. Just a mic at his voice. At town hall, Denton hears the truth. I was pulled over for being too slow. One man said. My daughter got searched because she had a hoodie and a backpack, said another. My husband never drove again after his last traffic stop, an elderly woman said softly. Franklin listened to each, and when he spoke it was quiet, but powerful. You don't fix trust with a press release. You fix it one conversation, one officer, one honest moment at a time. There were no fireworks, just nodding heads, some teary eyes, and the beginning of something real. Meanwhile, in the background, Officer Kyle Benton didn't quit. He didn't lash out. He enrolled, voluntarily, in training Franklin recommended, sat through difficult sessions, spoke hesitantly in the 3rd week of community circles. I used to think authority meant control, he said once, but maybe it should mean accountability. It wasn't a headline, but Franklin noticed, because that was the point, not to punish, to reform. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at Franklin Moore's desk, not type handwritten. The envelope was plain, the return address scribbled in uneven cursive. Inside, a folded note, Mr. Moore, I've been doing a lot of thinking about that day. About myself. I wasn't trained to see color, but maybe I was trained to ignore what it meant. You didn't yell. You didn't try to humiliate me. You just made me look in the mirror. I'm still figuring out what I see. But thank you for not walking away. Kyle Benton. Franklin read the letter once, then again, then placed it quietly in his desk drawer, not for evidence, but as a reminder. The Denton PD was different now. Not perfect, but moving. More community stops ended with handshakes than handcuffs. More new recruits sat down with community elders before their first patrol shift. And on one quiet Saturday, Franklin walked into a local high school gym for a career panel. He wasn't scheduled to speak, but someone called him up anyway. He stood in front of a row of teenagers in folding chairs. Some slouched, some whispered, some stared at the badge on his belt with that same suspicion he'd faced on the road that evening. He didn't give a lecture. He just told a story. About a man who thought he knew what power looked like, and about another who showed him what respect really meant. When he finished, the room didn't erupt. But one kid raised his hand. Was it hard? The boy asked. Franklin nodded. Every day. But the things that matter usually are. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet decision not to escalate, a steady voice in the middle of tension, a choice to hold the line, not with fists or force, but with facts, composure, and truth. Franklin Moore didn't become a hero with a headline. He became one because he refused to bend to bitterness. He held a badge, but never let it define him. He understood that the real strength of authority is in how it's used or refused. And in a world where suspicion rises quicker than trust, his calm presence became the ripple that changed a tide. As he walked out of that high school gym, the sun dipped again behind the rooftops of Denton, the same kind of golden hour as that night weeks ago. But something had shifted. In the street, in the station, in the hearts of a few who were finally willing to see more clearly. Sometimes it's not about what people say to you, but how you choose to answer. Dignity speaks louder than aggression. Patience is not weakness, and respect isn't something you demand with a badge, it's something you build with character. If you've ever felt overlooked, stereotyped, or unfairly judged, remember this: you don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to stand your ground, speak your truth, and never forget who you are. Have you ever been in a moment where choosing calm over conflict changed everything? Or a time when someone's quiet strength made you think twice? We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Your voice could be the one that sparks someone else's change. If this story touched your heart or opened your eyes, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss the next one. We tell stories that honor courage, demand accountability, and remind us that the strongest people are often the quietest ones. Real change begins in real lives. And it starts with all of us together.